itim na nanunumpa.
Natutuparin ko ng buong katapatan at sigasig
Natutuparin ko na buong katapatan at sigasig
ang aking mga tungkulin bilang Pangulo ng Pilipinas.
Another Marcos is back in Malacanang with Ferdinand Marcos Jr. as the 17th President of the Philippines.
Newly inaugurated President Marcos kicked off his term with a series of events.
He swore in his new cabinet official and attended the Philippine Air Force's 75th founding anniversary.
I am here not to talk about the past. I am here to tell you about our future. A future of sufficiency.
And President Bongbong Marcos and the First Family will be staying over at the Bahay Pangarap inside the Malacanang compound, according to Marcos's second cousin, Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Babe Romualdez.
Ngayon, siyempre kailangan i-upgrade ulit dahil medyo matagal-tagal na yun. So, inaayos nila ngayon para doon sila matitira ni President Mrs. Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
The new administration buckles down to work on day one of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. as president. A new Department of Foreign Affairs chief has been named. Still no health secretary, but what will his foreign policy look like? And when does he start fixing what he called were shortcomings in the COVID response now that cases are rising? We discuss in this special edition of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Maya-maya po sasamahan tayo ng iba pang Chiefs. For now, we can go straight to our first guest tonight, Philippine envoy to the United States, a cousin of the new president, Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez. Welcome to The Chiefs, Ambassador Romualdez.
Yes, welcome and thank you. Thank you for welcoming me.
No po, of course, welcome. Of course, and we know, welcome back. You're back in Manila, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. I'm back here, and I hope to be back to stay here for a little while to get things sort of like organized.
At least temporarily, from what I understand. But we'll get to that later, where we expect to be seeing you in the coming weeks. For now, I do want to ask you about the DFA, because a new appointment to the Department of Foreign Affairs Secretary. Could you tell us a bit more about who we're expecting, what we know about the incoming Foreign Affairs Secretary?
Well, definitely, Secretary Enrique Manalo is an experienced career diplomat. I have a very high regard for him. I respect him a lot. I've worked with him on many occasions, especially as the ambassador to the United Nations. So we've had a lot of interaction on many issues surrounding the United Nations. He's very, very familiar with geopolitics. So I think we've got a very good diplomat right now as the Secretary of Foreign Affairs.
I mean, talk to us a bit more about that. I mean, what qualities do we need to confront which issues in foreign policy for the Philippines?
Well, you know, there are a lot of changes going on around the world. Everybody knows the situation in Europe right now with the war in Ukraine. We have, of course, the what's happening here in our part of the world. There are many claimants. It's very important. So we have now a career diplomat who has been around for quite some time, who will be able to give the president the kind of perspective, perhaps, that he needs to be able to continue on how we will conduct our independent foreign policy so that we can take care of our own, especially for President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
Speaking of that perspective, and particularly when it comes to an independent foreign policy, a lot of people, of course, were listening in on the inaugural address of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. yesterday. And a lot of people also noted that it seemed to be thin, if not lacking on anything when it comes to foreign affairs. Why do you think that was? We seem to be having technical difficulties. We'll try to get Ambassador Babe Romualdez back later. Ambassador Romualdez, are you with us again? Nakamute po yata kayo.
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, it was, I didn't hear your question because it was a little bit cut off.
Okay. Ulitin ko lang po. I mean, yesterday, people seem to be looking for a lot of things, but one of the things that they were looking for was some direction, some vision, some statements on foreign policy. A lot of analysts were saying it seemed the inaugural speech seemed to be thin in that area. What are your thoughts on that? And why do you think, I mean, he did discuss Ukraine, he did discuss the global economy, but foreign policy was only mentioned in that regard.
Well, I think the president really wanted to just make it not very long, not very short, just enough the message to the people on what to expect from him personally and what he expects from the people. That the theme that he's always been saying, together we can surmount any of the problems that we face. The more detailed policies that he will spell out or lay out will be probably in the State of the Nation, which he has mentioned on many occasions. That is where he will lay out all the plans that he has for the next 6 years. And so the inaugural speech was more of a let's get together, let's move on, let's forget what happened during the elections, and let's be, because this is the only way we will be able to surmount the problems that the country faces.
And certainly that he did keep to his message, as you said, laying down his vision and, of course, his principles and his values, particularly when it comes to unity, unity, unity. This was in keeping with his campaign as well. But heading into the SONA in the few weeks we have before July 25, when, as you said, we can expect a little more detail and a little more fleshing out of, among other things, foreign policy. What are some areas, at least the bullet points, that we can fairly expect to be discussed in his first SONA?
Well, I don't want to go jump the gun, so to speak, because I really have very little knowledge of what he plans to say. But I do know in the area of foreign policy, which he has indicated to me, as he wanted me to go back to the United States as his ambassador, is to be more aggressive in our economic activity or economic trade between our two countries. This is very important for him. He has said this, that no one country can solve the problems of the economy, of the economic recovery of the world, unless the global economy starts to pick up and everyone has to sort of like pitch in. And he looks at the United States as an important partner. It's a big trading partner, as a matter of fact. And so he would like to see more of that, which we have been doing, but we will even step it up even more right now. I've had discussions with Secretary Ben Diokno about this, and we plan to really be a little more aggressive in our economic forums and economic roadshows that we're going to do, because this is an opportunity for us, quite honestly. The United States is also looking at that one. That's why they have what they call the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which was launched by President Biden in Japan not too long ago, maybe about a month ago, which falls right into what President Marcos wants to do. More economic cooperation between our two countries. And the other thing that is also very important is technologies on being able to have clean energy. The United States will be able to offer us some of that technology, like the modular reactors, the nuclear reactors that they're planning to sort of like set up for many countries around the world, especially those most vulnerable to climate change. That one is another opportunity that will be open for us as we step up our relationship with the United States.
Is there anything to rebalance as we pursue and continue an independent foreign policy between China on the one hand and the United States on the other? Is there anything to rebalance and to readjust based on your discussions with the incoming with President Bongbong Marcos?
I think the rebalancing is more like, again, going back to the economy. If these two countries, these two big economic powers, can offer us something that we need or we can use or will be good for us, at the same time, we can also offer them something in return, like I would say the exports that we may have, or perhaps even our overseas workers that have, whether we like it or not, is well in demand. This is something that we obviously would like to see. The other issues concerning these two powers, obviously, the president is very careful about getting sort of like a step by these two elephants. And he's always used that as an analogy on how to describe what will happen to us if these two elephants start to walk on the grass. We are the grass and we'll just fall, we'll just die. So this is what he really is looking at, the balancing act between these two great powers.
What is his directions when it comes to our military and defense and security arrangements with the United States? Mutual Defense Treaty, Visiting Forces Agreement, and so on.
He has said on various occasions and meetings, not only with the U.S. Embassy people here, but also with U.S. officials, like recently a meeting he had with Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman of the State Department. It was very clear that he sees the Mutual Defense Treaty and the Visiting Forces Agreement as a very important part of our security alliance with the United States. I don't see him really sort of like revising or moving in any direction that will go out of those two very important agreements that we have with the United States. As a matter of fact, I can see that he probably would like to see it even strengthened further to make it really more conducive to the interest of both our countries. There is really not much movement along those lines. Yes, it can be reviewed. In fact, we have a review board every year. Every year, the Visiting Forces Agreement, there is a review board. They look at the problems that might have arisen in the past or some things that we can improve on. The Mutual Defense Treaty, we have a Mutual Defense Board where they can meet at any time, perhaps even once a year, where they also continue to look at how we can continue to strengthen this very important alliance we have with the United States. And I don't think there's going to be any change in that one. There was a little change during the time of President Duterte, but I don't see it during this presidency. In fact, I see it to be even better and stronger now.
We'll try to, I'll try to push this a little bit. Notwithstanding what everybody knows, the biggest context with you, of course, is being ambassador to the United States and Washington. But you may have some insights on this. The Duterte administration, among other things, in the final weeks, called off negotiations with China on joint exploration in the West Philippine Sea. Everybody was pretty clear in making it clear that this was a decision by the Duterte administration. But does it speak as well for the direction and the position of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.?
Well, this joint exploration, it's been around for what? I think close to 3 years. Not much has happened because very clearly we insist that this joint exploration, we own this one. We are the majority, sort of. It's like an agreement. It's a joint venture, but we are the ones that actually are sort of like the driving force there because we own this. This is part of our territory. Obviously, the Chinese did not agree, so it was just going back and forth. Where, well, former Secretary Eddie Locsin says, look, if this thing's not going to go any further, I might as well cancel this and just start all over again for the next administration, which is what we're having right now. So that probably, I'm not sure whether President Marcos is going to look at this and see whether we can again revisit the issues surrounding the joint exploration. But I know that there's a lot of interest for for our country to be able to start exploring this. Remember, our energy problems, our energy requirements are really, really very important in the next 2 years because we have not had much movement along those lines. And we may have an energy crunch in about 2 to 3 years from now. So I'm sure President Marcos Jr. is going to look at the possibility of having joint exploration. But it doesn't have to be just with China. I know that we can get other countries, like perhaps other Western countries, like not only the United States, but even perhaps countries in Europe or Australia that might be interested in doing some joint exploration with us. We're hoping. Yes,
But before we bring in Ami Pamintuan, who's joining us from Manila, just a quick question to that. Is that part of the marching orders with you to explore other options for joint exploration with the United States?
Well, he did not directly tell me that, but he did mention it at some point in one of his conversations he had with some U.S. officials. That he looks at energy exploration as a very important part of what economic recovery is all about. So definitely, we have been, in fact, looking at other sources of a joint venture for this joint exploration. Remember, we had the Malampaya was actually Chevron, an American company. Yeah, so we could have something similar along those lines.
Sige. We're now joined by Ami Pamintuan. She's joining us from the port area at the Philippine Star offices in Manila. Ami.
Good evening, Ambassador. Sorry I'm late.
Hi, Ami. Very nice to see you again.
Yes, Ambassador, yung Memorandum Circular number 1 of President Marcos, he declared all positions vacant in a wide range of offices, na executive offices. What's your status now in the diplomatic service?
Well, I'm just banking on his word, but I'm not in Washington, so I'll just have to wait for obviously my reappointment, which is a normal. It normally happens. Extensions are given, but then if the next president does not really contest it, it's just a technicality of just having a document signed on the extension. But I may have to go through another round with the Commission on Appointments system to make it, yes, a confirmation that I'm being reappointed. So, and this falls for all other positions in the diplomatic corps and all that, public service, and perhaps even in other services of the government.
With this election of Enrique Manalo, are you expecting more career diplomats to be appointed to key positions around the world?
The president, I think President Marcos is very keen on really tapping career diplomats. You know, when we had a meeting with President Marcos, an informal dinner with him, with Secretary Locsin, he indicated that he would, and we did tell him that we have a lot of very good young career diplomats, very intelligent and very perceptive. And I think that giving our career diplomats a chance to be able to serve our country, not only at the Department of Foreign Affairs, but outside, is something that he really would like to see. He knows what it is like to be in government, that he will try to minimize political appointments, I'm sure. I guess political appointments like myself, if I can be of help, can be useful, then that's fine. But in other areas where I think we can have career diplomats in place, like for instance, right now, Secretary Manalo, who is a long-time career diplomat, while he is a political appointee because he was retired before, he still is considered to be a career diplomat and very, very well versed in many things. He's serving at the United Nations right now, so he knows the entire picture of what's happening in the world today.
Good luck. Okay. Did he mention any, during your talk with President Marcos, did he mention any particular ratio of career and political appointees in the diplomatic service that he would be aspiring for?
I don't think that there's really a clear percentage. It depends really on on the requirements of the department on who. Most often than not, career diplomats are assigned to countries where we have overseas workers. Now that we're going to have the Department of Migrant Workers, that may change, but career diplomats are more often really more important in areas where really we need somebody who is well versed in taking care of many of the issues surrounding our workers, because that's one of the main jobs that we diplomats have in the service. No? Is to take care of our Filipino workers abroad. But other than that, the usual places, just like the American system where we have political appointees in major countries like Japan, London, the United States, usually we have political appointees because these are considered to be personal in nature. In other words, the president, you are representing the president of the republic, and therefore, if he sends somebody who is personal coming from him, that is considered to be an honor for that country because they're being given the importance that they hopefully deserve.
Okay, we're speaking with Ambassador to the United States, Babe Romualdez. We'll take a quick break. We will come back with the Ambassador. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back to the Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Kasama pa rin po natin si Ami Pamintuan. She's joining us from Manila. And kasama na rin po natin si Ed Lingao of One News. We are still speaking with Ambassador to the United States. We fully expect him to continue to be the Ambassador to the United States under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Ambassador, thank you for staying on with us. You were discussing a while ago, you mentioned the new Department of Migrant Workers under Secretary Susan Ople. Of course, our OFWs have been at the core, at the center of our foreign policy for a long, long time already. But what does the creation of a dedicated Department for Migrant Workers bring to the table? what does it change in terms of our capacity and our mission and our ability, not only to look out for our people, but also to put the name of the Philippines out there?
Well, first of all, the Department of Migrant Workers obviously is dedicated to many of our overseas workers. We have, close to 12 million now all over the world. And they, with that department, it relieves many of the other responsibilities of the Department of Foreign Affairs. You know, the Department of Foreign Affairs really has good relations with the host country. We interact with them, we network with many of the major players in the country that we serve. And so that will back up many of the things that we could need. For instance, on many occasions, whenever our overseas workers have some legal problems, we'll be able to use the relationship we have with the host country. But now, with the migrant workers, they're dedicated to taking care of that technically. But the Department of Foreign Affairs will still be there to be able to now coordinate these efforts. In many other things, not only that, but making sure that our workers are given the fair shake, the kind of things that they require, and other areas where we can be of great importance to our relationship with the host country.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, medyo bubukod lang ako ng konti, a different topic. I am just hoping that you haven't talked about this yet. In the last 6 years kasi, then President Duterte seemed to avoid doing an official visit to the U.S. I'm wondering if there have been any discussions at all as to whether and when there will be a visit by the President, President Marcos, to the U.S.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Ed, because yesterday, the second gentleman, as you know, who is the personal representative,
yes, sir,
the special envoy of President Biden, came to attend the inauguration. With him, he carried a personal letter written by President Biden to President Marcos. In that letter, of course, he congratulated the president and that he hoped to be able to speak to him again by phone sometime soon, but also invited him to come to Washington when both our schedules will allow it. So it is really an open invitation for President Marcos to come to the White House. Of course, I asked him, how soon would you like to go? Because the Americans would like to see you there as soon as possible. And he said that, let me just look at what our domestic problems first and see the things before we start thinking about traveling. I think what this is in his mind really is for him to attend to many of the issues surrounding the domestic part first, which will probably take a couple of months. And then also it was suggested that he would travel to the ASEAN countries, which is also part of our diplomatic efforts to introduce him formally to many of these important allies. But the United States is very much in the radar, and the United States is very eager to have President Marcos come to the United States.
But sir, is it safe to assume that he will go there with diplomatic or sovereign immunity? And if that is the case, does the State Department have to in any way make a petition to the courts for that to take effect?
Not at all, not at all. A head of state has full diplomatic immunity. There would be no problem whatsoever. That assurance was actually given to him by the U.S. Embassy CDA Heather Variaba almost immediately after he took off. He won the elections. That he was definitely welcome to come to the United States. He and his family.
Ambassador, I understand Vice President Sara Duterte is going to the United States within this year. Is that visit already firmed up? Would you have some details for us?
Well, yes. The Vice President actually was invited to attend a meeting in relation to the United Nations. The United Nations General Assembly will take place around September 20 or 20, around that time frame. Before that, there is a UN, something to do with education, which of course the Vice President is very much interested in because of her position also as Secretary of Education. So she will be traveling to the United States in September. And I've also had the opportunity to invite her to to come back to Washington, which she was very gracious to accept. And I'm really, really looking forward to having the Vice President come to Washington, D.C. because when we had that, when the second gentleman made a call on her the other day, I was very impressed with the way she handled the meeting, and I even kidded her that perhaps she could be our other diplomat. Whenever the president may not be able to travel, she could definitely be. We could definitely use her charm in doing some diplomatic work for the Philippines.
Ambassador, speaking of charm, if you don't mind, I mean, in appreciation as well of the, let's say, the diplomatic work that our ambassadors have to do. It's no secret that over the past 6 years, you've had to do a lot of diplomatic work and a lot of smoothing over and translations and explanations and qualifications. On many occasions that President Duterte would be, let's say, less diplomatic than you. But President Marcos will also be facing, to Ed's point, will also be facing his own diplomatic challenges. Every time he goes abroad, never mind the official protocol, but civil society abroad, activists abroad, media abroad will keep bringing up his father, will keep bringing up martial law, will keep bringing up human rights, and for that matter, ill-gotten wealth of the Marcoses. What are the challenges that you see for the diplomatic community as they face these questions, not necessarily from state to state, but on the level of civil society and the media that will also be welcoming Mr. Marcos with their own agenda and with their own questions?
Well, I can tell you with my own experience, with many of, as you know, I traveled with several of our presidents in the past, starting with President Ramos up to President Estrada and President Gloria Arroyo, and even with President Aquino. And there will always be the NGOs or the groups that will be out there demonstrating against something, some issue. So there will be always that usual, what we call the usual suspects that will have that kind of activity, which is normal, especially for when they come to visit the United States, that prides itself of being an open freedom society. And so we can expect that. But knowing President Marcos, he has been able to clearly state that he, and I think he said it in his inauguration, that he is not going to talk about the past. He is talking about the future and the future of the country. So I can see that he will avoid any kind of that kind of question, because it's been around for more than, well, 36 years. And the answers are the same. And the cases will continue. Nobody's questioning that. But I think that, and which is what I always said, and which I told him myself, that you're not really revising history, you're actually writing your own history. And here's an opportunity here for him to make a mark on what to do. And that's why I'm very confident that he will do well, because he is highly motivated. His motivation is based on the fact that he had an overwhelming mandate of 31 million people voting for him. And secondly, very clearly, it's because of his name. He will definitely prove himself to be worthy of being the President of the Republic of the Philippines.
Ambassador, would you know if President Marcos is considering attending the UN General Assembly in September? And will he be joining the APEC Leaders Summit later in the year?
Definitely. We as I said, when we had an informal dinner with him, Secretary Locsin, Secretary Locsin informed him that without even asking him, he already, at the United Nations, countries have to be, it's first come, first served. When you put your name down there as head of state that will address the United Nations Assembly, the General Assembly. And Secretary Locsin immediately did that the minute he found out that President Marcos Jr. was going to be our next president. So he will definitely be a speaker at the United Nations. In APEC, that's a must. That's an important summit that all leaders attend, and I'm sure President Marcos will definitely attend that also.
Okay.
Oh,
we'd
sure
li-
na. Sure yun na, he will address the UN. Well, he will be attending the UN General Assembly.
Yes, he's already slated for that. Unless, of course, something comes up that requires him to stay in the country, then we have to cancel that appointed day or time that he's supposed to speak at the United Nations. I told him that very early on. I said that your sort of like exposure to the world, in the Western world especially, will be at the United Nations. But he will definitely also visit the ASEAN countries, as I said earlier.
Is Secretary Locsin playing some kind of role in this new administration?
Well, I told Secretary Locsin I would definitely like to see him back at the United Nations. So I mentioned it to the President, and I also mentioned it to Secretary Manalo. So hopefully he will be there. He did very well when he was our ambassador to the United Nations. He was very articulate, and he can express himself clearly on certain policies that we need to espouse at the United Nations. So I really think he'd be a great asset to our country.
And he's willing to serve again at the UN.
Well, jokingly, he said, "I'd like to be near you." So if I'm going to be in Washington, it'll be nice to have Secretary Locsin not too far away.
Okay, we'd like to say thank you to Ambassador Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez, our envoy to the US. Sir, good morning and maraming salamat sa inyo.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Maraming salamat rin. Thank you very much.
You're in Manila, di ba?
I'm here now. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you, sir.
Salamat. Good night.
Good night.
Salamat po.
And moving on to another topic, Metro Manila and 9 other areas in the country recorded another increase in COVID-19 positivity rates. Let's get more details. And joining us now via Zoom is Professor Guido David of the OCTA Research Group. Prof, good evening and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening, Professor.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
And Roby.
Magandang gabi, sir. Sir, pag ginigas namin kayo, parang ano Hindi naman, joke lang yun. But anyway, sir, you did mention this morning na tumaas yung positivity rates in several areas. But I do take note, yung talagang malaking tinalon, more than double, is Cavite, which is the second most populous province in the country, from 5.9% last week to 13.2% this week. What are we supposed to divine from these numbers?
Well, Cavite, in fairness, nag-adjusting numbers niya. It dipped a little as of today. I just checked with the latest numbers. It's down to 11.7%, but it's still high. It's more than 10%. In NCR, it went up again. It's now up to 7.9%. And if we're looking at the latest DOH numbers, Cavite has 87 cases. Not high compared to previous surges, yes, but no, it's increasing. Metro Manila today has reported 592 cases, so it is already within the projections we had between around 500 to 1,000 more or less by the first week of July. So what can we make of it? There's an increase in cases, yes. Cases are rising. Positivity rate is increasing because the positivity rate is one of our strongest indicators. But the healthcare utilization is still remaining low. So there are some positives to this, and we're not foreseeing any lockdown or any escalation of alert levels. Pero definitely, kailangan natin mag-ingat. We should be aware that cases are on the rise. We don't think it will be it will reach the same levels as January or the surges last year. We may be peaking at a few thousand cases. So it should be okay for most of us. But of course, the concern is, people, seniors, those with comorbidities, the vulnerable population that we should protect.
Yeah, and you mentioned the right word, comorbidities, because kanina we were speaking with Dr. Nina Gloriani of the Vaccine Expert Panel, and she was saying that their recommendation now is to, in fact, expand the access to the second boosters, not only to senior citizens and not only to people who are immunocompromised, but now to cover people who have comorbidities and possibly even lower the age to 50 years old. Is there, the DOH always says we will follow the data. Is there data that is compelling the head of the vaccine expert panel to say that maybe it is time to expand access to the second booster?
Well, I think it's, I mean, of course, it's just my opinion. I'm not a medical doctor. I think it's time to expand. The arguments I've been hearing over the past weeks or even months was that they did not have that compelling evidence based on studies in other countries. So ibig sabihin, the reward or the advantages of getting the second booster, they were not seeing it yet. I'm not saying it's not there. They were just not seeing it yet in the data. But other countries have already recommended second booster shots for 50 and above. So other countries are practicing it. And if the cost is, if there's no cost naman, I just don't see why not. I mean, strictly from a cost-benefit perspective, even if the benefit is not well established, where the cost is not, I mean, people who are going to take second boosters have already gotten 3 doses of the vaccine. So, I mean, if they're not showing any, possible side effects, that means there's no cost, I think, I believe. So, I think, we would support the recommendations, syempre, the vaccine expert panel. So we hope that this can be expanded so that more Filipinos who want to get the second booster shot. I mean, I want to emphasize that those who want to get the second booster shot, because the local governments are saying that there are people walking in trying to get the second booster shots, kaya lang, because it's not yet available for them, they have to refuse them. So, sayang naman yung vaccines.
Are we in a weak surge now, and are we headed that surge? Because that was your original projection, di ba? Is it going to be a moderate or a stronger surge that you are seeing now based on what the numbers are?
Okay, Amy. Yes, yung original projections namin, it's a weak surge, and I think we are seeing the weak surge now. It's already progressing according to our projections, because we projected this range of numbers, mga 500 to 1,000 NCR by the first week of July, and between 1,000 and 2,000 in the whole Philippines. And now, today, we had 1,243 cases. So this is the weak surge. Now, will it progress to a moderate or a stronger surge? Right now, the projections are that it will not progress to a stronger surge. Bakit? Because we did not see that in other countries with this Omicron subvariant, BA4, BA5. In UK, they're having a resurgence in cases, and in the US and in South Africa, they had that surge, but it was not the same level as the January surge. So based on that, we're not seeing it yet, but we're not saying it's not possible, but we're just not seeing it at this time. But it might progress to a moderate surge, but we're not seeing it that yet as well. Pero obviously, there's more chances of it becoming a moderate than a strong surge. But right now, the projection is still a relatively weaker surge. We hope it stays that way. Para naman positive vibes. We get a surge that's almost not a big factor for us, and that will give us more confidence that maybe we can finally live with the virus instead of being afraid of it.
Sir, tama ba intindi ko? We are not likely, again, I'm using the word likely, kasi we're talking about chances here. We're not likely to see the numbers to go up significantly in reference to a stronger surge that you referred to a while ago. It's possible, but it's not likely given what we've been seeing in other countries. So in other words, sir, kung tama, sir, in other words, it's not gonna get much worse, in all likelihood.
Yes, you got it right, Ed. Also, yung reproduction number, it's now around 2 in Metro Manila. And 2 seems like a high reproduction number. Pero in January, at this time, it was already at around 6. So, I mean, it was definitely faster back in January. So because it's slower now, we're not seeing that it's it will progress to a stronger surge. It might still happen, but we're not seeing it at this time.
This is despite our waning vaccine immunity and our failure to get a second booster shot. Still, the numbers don't look like they're going up significantly.
Well, we have first booster shots, and yung waning immunity naman, it affects people differently. So it's case-to-case basis. So some people have, decreasing levels of immunity faster compared to other people. So mahirap kasi i-generalize yung waning immunity. So it could be that some people, baka kayo, mataas pa yung immunity levels niyo, for example, and someone else ay baka bumaba na. So so that's person dependent, and the vaccines still prevent us from, or help prevent severe COVID. Yun din naman yung mahalaga dito. So a lot of people are getting the mild version. Pero that being said, syempre meron pa rin nagiging moderate to severe, especially the unvaccinated ones.
Are there any outlier provinces or maybe even regions that you think is cause for greater alarm?
Well, the ones we listed, Robbie, this positivity rate increases are more or less the provinces we're monitoring right now. So this includes NCR, almost all of Calabarzon, so Cavite, Laguna, Rizal, and Batangas especially. And then sa Central Luzon, I think Bulacan and Pampanga more or less are seeing upticks. Especially Pampanga, their positivity rate is higher. And then the Western Visayas, not just in Iloilo, but we're also seeing it in the other places. Antique, Aklan, Capiz. I think it's around the tourist destinations. I mean, Boracay is, I think, attracting a lot of tourists. So it's mostly those areas, although we're starting to see an uptick also in Cebu and in Central Visayas. So, and also in Baguio City, in Benguet, and parts of Region 1 and Region 2. So it's there are some upticks in occurring in many provinces. Some of them are still at low levels. Some of them are picking up significantly. So yung medyo mataas yung positivity rate, the ones that we reported. We're more concerned about those with greater than 5% positivity rate.
How's your data gathering now? Because for several months, we've been talking about the difficulty of collecting accurate data, no? Has it improved in any way the past few weeks, siguro? Are more people getting tested? Are you getting more test results from the Department of Health, for example?
I think, Ami, we're not getting more test results. I think it's been status quo over the past month, and there will likely be a new, Secretary of Health and the undersecretaries. And I hope this is something that they could look into. We don't have to be afraid of the virus at this time. We're learning to live with the virus. We have other more serious challenges like the economy. So, we're not even thinking of escalating alert levels. But I think, personally, I think the monitoring is still important. Kasi like that, yung tanong ni Robbie, we need to know where the cases are happening so that, kasi if we want to espouse personal responsibility, na each person, learns how to protect themselves, they should also be aware if cases are rising and if it's rising in their area. So I think, the data gathering should be there. I mean, I know a lot of countries have stopped reporting, their data. Some countries have stopped testing, but I think, at least the data should still be there for the monitoring.
Speaking of data, I think you were the one we asked. I asked before if we have any idea at this point, or if there are any studies to help us understand how much of our population at this point actually got the virus. Do we have any data or any research that can give us some big picture for us that over the past 2 years, how many Filipinos actually were already exposed, whether they knew it or not?
Yeah, unfortunately, Robbie, it's still a plan. Now we're planning to have this research project that will try to test for antibody levels in the general population, and that will answer the question. I'll give an example. The UK, they actually tested, surveyed, or which would be more or less random tested school children, and they found out 99% of secondary students, so mga high school students, already have antibodies. So it's either they got vaccinated or they got infected, and and that's very helpful to know. Moving forward, especially with reopening of classes, face-to-face classes. For me, it would be interesting to know how many of our kids, high school or maybe even elementary, have antibodies. So the UK, I think 80+% of elementary children have antibodies, and then 99% of high school. So we should have these kinds of parallel studies, because it will help us assess then how resilient we are. Not just from vaccines, kasi baka, tinutulak natin vaccines, pero when we check, marami na pala may antibody level, matas yung antibodies, or marami na pala may antibodies against COVID, and therefore, maybe we shouldn't be as afraid anymore if we know that information.
Go ahead, Ami, sorry.
Kung i-improve yung data gathering, sino kaya mag-i-initiate? Because, President Marcos mentioned shortcomings in the COVID response. So, baka pwedeng may proposal kung paano i-improve yung database ng COVID response. Sino kaya pwedeng initiate nun?
Yeah, Ami, as you know, si Joey Concepcion actually formed this group, advisory council of experts, and he is sending recommendations. So may mga aspects kami tiningnan initially. So this might eventually be covered in our next meeting. So he assembled a group of experts. I don't know if I'm but I'm part of that group, along with several medical doctors and some fellows from OCTA Research, like the Father Nicanor, the Professor Ranjit are also there.
Dr. David, we're almost out of time. One quick question lang, follow through dun sa point about that study that you want to conduct. Because I was discussing it with some friends, and everybody was asking, ano yung methodology nun? How do you isolate and how do you determine, let's say people have the antibodies, how do we isolate for people who have the antibodies because they were exposed, or they have the antibodies because they got the vaccines? Just very quickly, how do you get a control group if we assume that a lot of people have their vaccination already?
Well, actually, I have to check then, because in the methodology that they did in the UK, they were able to determine which percent of the children had the antibodies from vaccination and from exposure. It's possible na, they just ask this question. I'm not sure about the biological aspect of this, so I have to maybe consult with someone like Father Nicanor, who's a molecular biologist, if this can be done just on the test alone. Pero from my understanding, if it's going to be like a survey, then we can also ask the, for example, the child or the person or the respondent, if they actually got COVID, or if they're aware if they got COVID. And that may help us determine if it's from vaccination alone. So we can also ask, of course, if they got vaccinated, or if they got both, they got vaccinated and they got COVID, which one happened first. So I think with these questions, we may be able to identify if what type of antibodies they got from vaccination or from infection.
Okay, Dr. David, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Guido David of OCTA Research. And that will be all for this edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to everyone, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.